shocking truth. My cousin took everything from me. This devastating betrayal happened at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, a time when the world sleeps, and darkness wraps around the quiet like a heavy blanket. But in that stillness, Claudia's heart raced like it was about to burst. She felt the gut-wrenching realization that her life was on the brink of chaos, all because of her cousin, Brian. With trembling hands and a lump in her throat, she couldn't shake the sensation that the ground beneath her was crumbling. Shadows danced along the walls of her cramped bedroom, twisting into ominous shapes that mirrored her thoughts. In just a few hours, everything she held dear, the prized family heirloom, her small savings, even her trust, would vanish like a whisper in the wind. It started with a casual text from Brian, asking for a favor. At first, it seemed harmless enough. He needed a place to crash for a night. But then came the unsettling details. He had lost his job. His girlfriend left. The excuses piled up like a wet stack of leaves, whispering that something wasn't right. A jolt of panic coursed through her. What if he had a plan in mind? The way his green eyes sparkled with guilt, yet masked something darker, sent chills down her spine. What if the cousin she grew up laughing with was hiding a more sinister side? A side that could take everything from her in a heartbeat. The familiar creak of the staircase echoed ominously. Each step he took resonated with dread. Her heart raced faster. Shadows in her mind whispered cautions she couldn't ignore. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the minutes crept by, an unsettling tension filled the air around her. The wind howled outside, rattling the window like a ghost begging to be let in. Claudia's breaths came sharp and quick, each one echoing like a warning bell. If Brian entered her room, would she be able to stop him? The thought felt paralyzing, yet there was no escape. She needed answers, and fast. Just as she was about to bolt for the door, she heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock. The door swung open slowly, and Brian appeared, his face a mask of feigned innocence. "What is wrong, see?" he asked, but he didn't have to. His eyes darted around the room. What was he looking for? Whatever he found could spell disaster. An inexplicable chill gripped her chest, and she understood that this was more than just an ordinary confrontation. This was the moment everything changed. Would she confront him, or would she let the shadows of her trust guide her deeper into betrayal? The urgency of her next move felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. What would she do next? The tension in the air thickened as Brian stepped into the room, each footfall echoing with more weight than the last. Claudia's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She clenched her fists, desperately trying to contain her fear, her anger. Was this really the cousin she once adored? The boy who had shared secrets and dreams in their childhood? The realization stung like a wasp. "Claudia, come on. I can tell something's up," Brian said, leaning casually against the doorframe as if he had all the time in the world. His attempt at nonchalance felt as thin as the silence hanging over them. What's going on? She wanted to scream, to accuse him of everything she'd been thinking, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she took a deep breath and forced herself to speak calmly. "Why are you here, Brian? You said you just needed a place to crash," but he darted a glance around the room again, a ghost of a smile flickering across his lips. "It's just family, right? They always take care of each other." His eyes flashed as he stepped closer, and she recoiled instinctively. The warmth of familiarity was gone, replaced by a cold, piercing gaze that made her stomach churn. "It doesn't feel like that anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "You're hiding something. Come on, see. Can't we just forget the past for a second? I'm in a tough spot." The desperation in his voice was laced with a hint of irritation, a flicker of something darker. Claudia sensed the undercurrent of menace beneath his words. The shadows in her room felt alive, twisting against the dim light. "What did you do?" she whispered, dread pooling at the base of her spine like ice. The thought of what he could have gotten himself into made her stomach turn. Still, she forced herself to keep her eyes locked on his. "Nothing." He backed off, raising his hands in mock defense, but the unconvincing gesture only stoked her fears. "I just need a break. Family means helping each other out." Helping each other or taking? The sting of betrayal sharpened her voice. Was she really having this conversation with the person she once trusted most? Each word felt like a step deeper into a darkness she couldn't fathom. His expression shifted, the mask slipping away. "You don't know what it's like, Claudia. You're in your little bubble while I'm struggling. This is keep or be kept." His eyes flared with an intensity that sent a shiver racing down her spine. What had changed? What darkness had seeped into her cousin's mind? The answer sat just beyond her grasp, taunting her. "I'm not scared of you," she said, the tremor in her voice betraying her bravado. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over the screen, ready to call for help. Did she dare? Brian leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "You should be, see. Because tonight isn't just about you and me anymore." The weight of his words hit her like a blow, and she felt a chill creep into the room. A hardness set in his jaw as he took a step forward, a predator closing in on its prey. "You're about to find out exactly how far family loyalty goes." Claudia froze, fear coursing through her veins like ice water. With her instincts screaming for her to flee, she hesitated for only a heartbeat. Could it really get worse than this? Her gaze darted to the drawer where she kept her grandmother's heirloom. Could Brian be eyeing that, too? And then suddenly, the lights flickered above them. A power surge? Or something more ominous? The room plunged into darkness, and she felt the air shift. "Get away from me, Brian!" She shouted instinctively, but her voice echoed back to her from the shadows. What came next would push her to the brink. Would she find the strength to face her cousin in this terrifying moment, or would the darkness swallow everything she loved whole? The darkness clung to Claudia like a heavy fog, each breath turning into a laborious task. She strained her eyes, trying to catch a glimpse of Brian, but he was a shadow within the shadows. Panic squeezed her chest tighter, every instinct screamed at her to bolt for the door, but the instinct to confront him, to stand her ground, held her in place. "Brian," she called, unsure of how her voice would sound in the midnight silence. Time slowed, and the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. "What do you want?" "Want?" He echoed back, amusement lacing his voice, but it was twisted, cruel. "What do you think I want?" The air crackled, and right then she knew this was no family reunion. It was a reckoning, a showdown in the dark. Claudia focused on her heartbeat, anchoring herself, but the wild rhythm was a betrayal in itself. Suddenly, a soft scuffle inside the room broke through the oppressive silence. Claudia's heart raced, and she stepped back, bumping into her nightstand. The drawer rattled, and her grandmother's heirloom, the pendant she cherished like a piece of her soul, felt exposed. "Is that it?" Brian taunted. "The old necklace? I thought you'd keep something like that locked away." A dangerous chuckle escaped him, echoing ominously. Claudia swallowed hard. "You don't want this, Brian. It's all I have left of her." She hoped to pierce through the haze of anger clouding his mind. "Ah, see. You're making this harder than it has to be." He stepped forward, his footfalls deliberate, a predator savoring the fear of its prey. "You don't understand how much I need it. How much I need everything." The lights flickered back to life, piercing the darkness with harsh clarity. Claudia squinted, her eyes adjusting, and she finally saw him. His expression was a mix of desperation and greed, something she had never seen before. The moment the room illuminated, she darted her gaze to the drawer. Just as she thought she was safe, Brian lunged towards her, snatching the pendant in a flash. "Stop!" Claudia shouted, her voice louder now, ignited by rage. He held the necklace up, dangling it like bait. This is the answer to my problems. Your problems, too, really. What are you talking about? The confusion twisted into anger. This isn't about money or things. This is our family. He laughed again, but it was different now, a twisted resonance that raised the hair on the back of her neck. You still don't get it. You've always lived in your pretty little bubble. Family is about survival, and I'm not going down without a fight. She took a step forward, a mix of horror and determination swirled within her. What did you get involved in? This doesn't make sense. The shadows danced behind him again, his eyes glinting with something dark and unfathomable. Let's just say, I've made deals to stay afloat. And you, dear cousin, have something I need. But you won't take it from me, she whispered, grounding herself, realizing now she couldn't back down. She felt the weight of obligation, the burden of family loyalty meeting personal survival. Brian moved abruptly towards her, that predatory gleam igniting in his eyes again. That's where you might be mistaken. Claudia's chest tightened as the scene intensified. It was a delicate thread unraveling between them, family ties fraying under the pressure of desperation and betrayal. The door swung open suddenly, and a figure stepped in, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. Claudia's breath hitched as hope crashed into despair. She opened her mouth to call out, but the name caught on her tongue. Who's there? Brian's demeanor shifted, suddenly alert, sensing the intrusion. The figure remained still, cloaked in shadows, tension thickening around them. Could this presence turn the tide? Or would it only complicate the web of deceit that had ensnared them? Every heartbeat felt like a countdown to chaos. Claudia realized that she was no longer just defending herself, she was about to dive into a deeper, darker family secret. As the figure stepped closer, her question loomed larger than ever: who was about to walk into this nightmare? The figure moved slowly, each step deliberate, the tension crackling like static in the room. Claudia held her breath, unable to shake the instinctive fear that blanketed her. The shadowy silhouette grew sharper, revealing itself under the flickering lights. It was their uncle, Daniel. His disheveled hair and weary expression spoke of sleepless nights and worries that ran deeper than Claudia could imagine. Daniel. She gasped, relief flooding through her. Help. Claudia, what the hell is going on? He said, his voice edged with anxiety as he took in the scene, Brian gripping the pendant like it was a lifeline, Claudia standing defiant yet terrified. Stay back. This doesn't involve you. Brian hissed, a wild spark in his eyes as he turned to face his uncle, the pendant glinting ominously in the harsh light. Daniel's brow furrowed. What did you think you'd accomplish, Brian? This isn't how family works. Family? You think you can lecture me about family after leaving me to suffer in that hellhole? Brian spat, shaking his head in furious disbelief. You have no idea what it's like to be discarded. Claudia felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. She had avoided those family discussions, the ones that traveled like storms through unspoken corners of their lives. But here it was, raw and bleeding in front of her. Brian, listen to yourself. Daniel said, stepping closer, hands raised in a gesture of peace. You're about to destroy everything for a stupid necklace. This isn't just about you. It's not stupid. Brian roared, the anger spilling over. This necklace holds everything: our family history, our legacy. It's not worth this. Daniel's desperate plea pierced through the chaos. Look around. We can fix this, but not like this. Claudia could see Brian's resolve flickering, uncertainty creeping into the shadows of his rage. He glanced back at the pendant, then towards Daniel, his breathing ragged. What do you know about fixing anything? You ran away. There's a lot you don't understand. There was a depth to Daniel's words that made Claudia's heart pound. It was as if he held secrets that could shift the dynamics of their fractured family. Before she could voice her thoughts, a noise echoed from outside. A siren's wail pierced the thick silence. Panic shot through her. They're coming. We need to end this now. Brian's jaw clenched, and fear blazed in his eyes. If they come in here, I will make sure enough. Daniel thundered, and for the first time, she saw her uncle's confidence. Let go of the necklace. It's not yours to claim. We can talk, just let it go. There was a moment of silence, a fragile breath drawn before a tempest. Brian's grip loosened ever so slightly, a flicker of doubt playing across his features. Claudia could see the internal struggle, wrestling between desperation and a glimmer of hope. Do you see, Brian? She urged softly, her voice breaking through the tension. We're family. We can find a way. But his bitter laugh cut through her. Family? He sneered, the brokenness resurfacing. You think that word carries weight now? After everything? I can't trust any of you. Not anymore. Before she could argue, Brian took a step back, pulling back like a coiling spring. The sirens grew louder, closing in. Panic gripped her heart again, now deeper. Brian, please. And just like that, he turned, darting toward the window. Claudia moved to follow, but Daniel stepped forward, blocking her path. Let him go, he demanded softly, his eyes pleading with hers. Let him go? Claudia's voice echoed with disbelief. You can't be serious. The finality of decision hung in the air like a storm cloud. Was leaving Brian to his fate their only choice? As she peered through the window, her heart raced. He was scrambling in the grim night, his silhouette swallowed by shadows, driven by despair. Claudia, we need to figure this out. Now. Daniel urged, urgency clear in his voice. The sirens wailed closer. In that moment, one fact was clear: their family was unraveling. Secrets loomed unspoken, and Brian was just the beginning. As the door slammed behind them, Claudia felt the world shift again. What lay ahead was not merely a confrontation with her cousin, but the unraveling of all she thought she knew. Where do we even start? She whispered, staring into the chaos of the night. The answer felt impossibly distant as shadows danced around them, swirling with unanswered questions that might finally reveal the truth. Was Brian's desperation a cry for help or the harbinger of something much worse? Claudia felt the weight of uncertainty settle on her shoulders, as heavy and oppressive as the thick night air outside. Daniel's brow furrowed in concern, his face pale under the flickering lights. They had a moment, just a split second, to make a choice. Behind them, the night pulsed with police sirens, echoing like a heartbeat through the emptiness. They couldn't stay here, not with Brian out in the dark. They'll think we're part of this, Claudia whispered frantically, glancing at Daniel as if searching for a lifeline. What if they find him? What if he does something reckless? Then we go after him, Daniel replied, the fire in his voice flaring again. We can't let him ruin himself over this. A knot twisted in Claudia's stomach, but she knew he was right. They had to move. As they darted for the door, adrenaline surged through her, propelling her forward with each frantic step. The night air hit them like a splash of cold water. Claudia shivered. It was more than the temperature. It was the chilling uncertainty of what lay ahead. Where do we find him? She breathed, scanning the streetlights for signs of life or movement. By the old factory. He always went there when he was upset, Daniel said, pointing toward the jagged outline of the derelict building looming in the distance. We have to hurry. They ran down the cracked sidewalk, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the darkness. Claudia's heart raced, not just from the physical exertion but from the fear coiling in her chest. Brian was unpredictable. She feared what he might do in his anguish. As they approached the factory, the air crackled with an undercurrent of danger. Lights flickered inside, casting eerie shadows through broken windows. Stay behind me, Daniel ordered, his protective instincts kicking in. Claudia nodded, determination propelling her forward. The door creaked as they pushed through it, the chill of the night following them inside. The faint sounds of scuffling echoed off the weathered walls. Brian. Daniel called, his voice almost swallowed by the darkness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, holding the pendant aloft like a trophy. You think you can save me? You think I want saving? Brian's voice echoed with an edge of madness. His eyes shone wild, reflecting the light in a way that sent chills down Claudia's spine. Put it down, Brian. She pleaded, stepping closer. This isn't you. Not me? He laughed sharply, the sound breaking the fragile atmosphere. You have no idea what I've become. This was meant to be mine. It was taken from me. Listen, Daniel began, but Brian cut him off. No. I've had enough of being ignored, enough of being the afterthought. He gripped the pendant tighter, his hands trembling. This is my chance. Daniel stepped forward slowly, hands outstretched, eyes focused on Brian's conflicting emotion. You don't need that to prove anything. We can figure this out together. But Brian shook his head, anguish spilling over into fury. Together? You left me. You did nothing while I suffered. It's not too late. Daniel's voice echoed with raw desperation, but Brian's gaze turned steely, as if dark clouds had surged over him. Claudia felt a surge of fear as she watched Brian, the angry lines on his face replacing the boy she once knew. You don't understand, he said quietly, yet fiercely. Everything I've lost, everything you took from me, it all comes down to this moment. Before they could respond, Brian turned abruptly, the pendant swinging like a pendulum, too close to the edge of a crumbling ledge. He was barely holding on to his sanity, and the trembling intensity in his posture sent Claudia's heart plummeting. Don't! She shouted, stepping closer in a frantic attempt to reach him. But then, the pendant slipped in that slow-motion moment, time warped around them. They all lunged forward, instinctively desperate to save it, but it felt as if fate had intertwined their actions with darker forces. It shattered against the ground, echoing like a gunshot, its shards sparkling in the dim light. The air thickened with dread. Brian's eyes widened, a mixture of horror and disbelief. Claudia knew they had crossed a line. Something had shifted irrevocably. What have you done? He whispered, and the tremor in his voice sent a jolt of fear through her. It was more than a necklace they had shattered, it was a fragile bond, and now, they stood on the precipice of something terrible. As Brian stepped back, air knocked from his lungs, Claudia realized the gravity of their actions. Would they heal or rupture further? Daniel, we need to get him out. Claudia urged, but Brian's expression darkened. The shadows loomed closer, and she felt the heavy curtain of danger slide down again. As they stood frozen, the silence became deafening, their futures now intertwined with the fallout of the pendant's destruction. What had really been unleashed? Claudia's chest tightened as she watched Brian take another step back, his face a whirlwind of foreign emotions: rage, confusion, and now, a haunting touch of despair. His hands trembled, the broken pieces of the pendant reflecting fragments of their shared past, memories that were now splintering like glass. Brian, please, Daniel said tentatively, trying to bridge the gulf forming between them. We can talk about this. We can fix everything. But Brian's expression hardened, as if an impenetrable wall had shot up around him. What's left to fix? He spat, his voice gaining confidence even as his body shifted precariously close to the edge. You shattered it all. You, both of you. Claudia felt the heat from his words sting deep. Was that true? Had they really taken everything from him? A wave of guilt smashed against her instinct to defend herself. We never meant for it to end this way, she stammered, desperation creeping into her tone. We were trying to help you. We care about you. Care? Brian laughed, a bitter edge coating the sound, slicing through the stillness of the factory. What do you know about care? You both turned your backs when I needed you most. And now he stopped, glancing, almost knowingly at the space where the pendant had shattered. Now I have nothing. But I refuse to go down without a fight. Before either of them could react, the shadows in the factory seemed to writhe and pulse, as if drawing energy from the conflict brewing among them. It felt as if they were not alone anymore. Claudia turned her head uneasily, her instincts screaming that they needed to leave this place. Brian, we can help you, Daniel pressed, stepping forward cautiously. That necklace, it was a symbol of your pain and the things you lost. But you can create new memories? Brian cut in, eyes blazing. I don't want memories. I want justice. You don't understand what I'm capable of when pushed to my limits. Don't do this. Claudia yelled, knowing instinctively that the stakes were rising. You might still regret what you do now. We don't want you hurting yourself. Brian's laughter rang out, sharp and hollow. You think I don't know pain? That's all I've known. It makes me stronger. He paused, looking contemplative for a moment, as if the chaos inside him wrestled with a flicker of doubt. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the factory, heavy footsteps outside, growing closer. Police sirens still wailed in the distance, a reminder of the world creeping in. The danger drew nearer, a warning that time was running out. Brian, we need to choose now, Daniel said urgently. Either we work together, or we let this consume you. The longer you wait, the closer they come. Brian faltered, caught in an internal conflict. The shadows seemed to quiver around him, drawn in by his turmoil. Claudia felt an electric charge in the air. Was this what rising desperation looked like? She sensed the pivotal moment hanging silently in the balance. What decision would Brian make? For a brief second, the anger in Brian's eyes flickered, replaced by something softer. But just as quickly, the darkness returned, an impenetrable veil, masking the boy he once was. Get away from me! He screamed, panic spilling into his voice. He stepped backward, the edge of the crumbling ledge nearing him like an unforgiving abyss. Claudia lunged forward, instinct taking over, just as Daniel shouted. No! But Brian didn't move toward them, instead finding solace in the shadows behind him, surrendering to a force she couldn't see. All around them, the world seemed to pause, the footsteps outside fading into ominous silence. Then the ground beneath Brian shifted. It felt like the earth itself had betrayed him. In that split second, Claudia understood this was about to spiral into something beyond their control. It was more than just Brian losing his grounding, it was a precursor to something darker. Claudia's throat tightened. Brian. With a sudden crack, the ledge he stood upon crumbled away, sending him reeling. The sight of him teetering on the edge shot a spike of terror through her. Just as his arms flailed, he locked eyes with Claudia. You can't save me. The air twisted with fear, and she gasped, a hand reaching out. But then he fell, the shattering sound of something else breaking echoed through the factory, something even larger than the pendant's destruction. As if a dark curtain had lifted and unveiled the truth lying beneath, a truth that had yet to be revealed. What would happen now that the past was unleashed and the future faded into uncertainty? Claudia felt the intensity pulse around her, ready to unleash its secrets. She could only hope they had the strength to face it. As darkness swirled and threatened to swallow everything whole, one thought lingered in her mind. What had they truly awakened? The world felt like it spun on a different axis in that moment. Brian's scream echoed through the factory, bouncing off the rusted metal walls and crashing into Claudia's soul. She could barely breathe, the weight of despair pressing down on her chest. The shadows around her thickened, swirling like a whirlpool, beckoning and warning. She glanced at Daniel, whose eyes were wide with shock, the fear mirrored back at her. They had crossed boundaries they would never take back. Brian! Daniel shouted, rushing toward the edge, his heart beating in tempo with the pulsing fear. But Claudia could only watch, paralyzed, the remnants of Brian's despair tangling her thoughts. She broke free, lunging toward the gaping abyss even as the darkness swelled and filled the space where Brian had just stood. I can't lose you too. She cried out, her voice breaking with a mixture of panic and defiance. She couldn't picture a world where she had lost her friend. The idea alone sent a shiver racing down her spine. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with uncertainty. They both peered into the void, though as the echoes of his fall began to fade, a chilling resolve filled the room. Something crucial had shifted, something so serious that it entwined fate with betrayal. Suddenly, the shadows erupted. Figures emerged, swirling in and out of focus. Ghostly silhouettes, vague yet filled with a knowing menace, began to stalk toward them, drawn from the depths of the factory's secrets. What the hell is happening? Daniel whispered, stepping back toward Claudia, as if their shared fear could somehow shield them from the dark. Their movement drew the figures closer, their shapes coiling, hungry. Claudia's mind raced. Brian's pain had summoned them. The realization stung like a slap. She had seen the darkness within him. It wasn't just his anguish, it was a beacon for something more nefarious. Then we need to find him. He can't face this alone. Daniel urged, though his eyes roamed the relentless creatures creeping closer. But the shadows continued to close in, merging and separating like threads in a loom, weaving an obscured message. Claudia felt her chest tighten again, but beneath the fear, a resolve began to blossom. They couldn't allow this dark tide to claim Brian. He was worth fighting for. Stand together. She called to Daniel. We can't let them isolate us. Their hands clasped tightly, the connection fierce as the first dark figure lunged at them, blur like a feral beast, its intent unmistakable. Claudia felt a surge of energy flushing through her veins, a desperate sense of survival ignited within her. We're not afraid. She roared, channeling all her love for Brian into her voice. The shadows paused, almost taken aback, as if her words held power. In that instant, something electric danced in the air. The remaining whispers of Brian's anguish were refracted through the strength of their bond. But then, from behind them came a burst of light, cutting through the darkness like a knife. A faint glimmer, growing brighter, illuminated the cavernous space, revealing what had been masked by the shadows. The figure of Brian emerged from the haze, swaying on the cusp between despair and defiance. His expression, once haunted, was now painted with steely resolve. But where they expected weakness, they found something else, an aura of power that thrummed louder than any fear. Claudia. Daniel. He shouted, his voice tinged with a wild, untamed energy. You shouldn't have come here. Claudia felt her breath catch. The shadows recoiled, sensing the imminent clash between Brian and the force they had conjured together. She hesitated. Brian, we need to leave. This isn't you. His eyes flickered, betraying doubt for just a moment before they hardened again. No. You don't understand. I've finally awakened what was trapped inside me. This is my power. A shudder rippled through the factory, and the shadows surged forward again, hungry and relentless. The air crackled with tension, a storm building around them. Claudia's heart raced as a chilling realization consumed her. Brian was teetering on the edge of something monumental, something that could consume him whole. In that moment, a single thought echoed relentlessly in her mind. What else had they awakened beyond Brian's pain and fury? As the darkness swelled, she sensed they were standing on the precipice of an unimaginable truth. Would they find their friend within the chaos or lose themselves in the shadows forever? The shadows pulsed around them, swirling like a tempest of nightmares. Claudia felt a flicker of fear. Desperation clawed at her limbs as she stood there, torn between saving Brian and protecting herself from the maelstrom of darkness that was closing in. Brian. She shouted again, her voice strained. You don't have to do this. We can help you. He shook his head vehemently, eyes glinting like glass shards. Help? You don't understand. This power, it's mine. It's finally my time to be free. His voice clawed at the edges of her sanity. The confidence and rage in his tone sent a shiver down her spine. Just then, one of the dark figures lunged at Daniel. It was fast, its form a blur against the dim light, and he barely dodged, stumbling backward. Claudia. It's coming right for me. Panic laced his voice, bringing Claudia back to the impending danger. A wave of resolve surged through her. They couldn't allow this darkness to win. Stick together. She yelled, her mind racing. They needed to counter the shadows with their unity. If Brian had tapped into something sinister, they could still pull him back from the edge. Close your eyes, Brian. Daniel yelled, his tone frantic. You need to fight it. But I am the darkness now. Brian roared, and the shadows responded, writhing feverishly as if they were alive, weaving toward him like worshippers to a god. The factory shuddered beneath the weight of his words. Tremors shot through the ground. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, showering Claudia and Daniel like rain. She looked at Daniel, his face pale with fear. What if he can't come back? She whispered, the thought nearly choking her. I won't believe that. He hissed, shaking his head, determination flashing in his eyes. We have to try. Fight with me. Claudia called to Brian again, desperation flooding her words. She felt the shadows sway, fizzling out for just a moment at the raw emotion in her plea. You're still inside there. We'll help you control this. You don't have to be alone. For the first time, doubt flickered across Brian's face, threatening to melt his expression of fury. Alone, he murmured, glancing at the encroaching darkness that surged around him. Seizing the moment, Claudia reached her hand toward him, her heart pulsating with love and fear. We will face this together, just like always. You won't lose us. Brian. Daniel echoed, stepping forward, arms outstretched as if he could physically pull Brian back from the abyss. You're stronger than this darkness. Don't let it win. A strangled sound escaped Brian's lips, half a growl and half a plea. The shadows lurched around him, growing restless, sensing Brian's shifting alignment. They closed in tighter, gnashing at the edges of reality and threatening to consume him whole. In that one moment, between light and darkness, silence hung in the air. Claudia felt Brian's heartbeat racing, mismatched with her own palpitating chest. She realized that time was slipping, and she could almost hear the clock ticking towards something inevitable, but in her gut, a flicker of hope remained. Trust us. She cried out, her voice filling the factory like a battle cry. The shadows recoiled slightly at her declaration, their power faltering. The air shimmered with tension, and Claudia held her breath, praying for a miracle, but then, a deeper, more menacing growl erupted from Brian's throat as the shadows surged forward again, seemingly fueled by his turmoil. No. Stay back. He screamed, clutching at his head, as if trying to wrestle control from the demons threatening to take over. Brian, we need to fight it together. Claudia screamed, inching closer, but the oppressive weight of darkness pushed her back, an intangible wave that felt like sharp claws against her skin. Just as she was about to reach out again, a new sound emerged, a low rumble that reverberated through their bones. It was a beckoning, an ancient calling awakening something deep within Brian. With a jolt, Claudia realized, the shadows weren't just ravenous, they were alive, communicating, whispering secrets ancient and potent. What? Had they awakened? What lay buried in Brian that was now stirring to the surface? Claudia! He suddenly yelled, his face twisted with anguish, as the shadows writhed violently around him. I can't hold on much longer. Fear enveloped Claudia anew. Hold on, Brian. Please. But she knew, deep inside, the battle was morphing into something far more perilous than any of them had anticipated. The factory trembled once more, and in that tremor, she felt the impending crescendo build. Would Brian manage to break free, or would the darkness claim him forever? And as the shadows coiled tighter, an unmistakable question loomed in her mind, growing more urgent with every passing second. What had they genuinely unleashed when they ventured into this darkness together? The shadows curled tightly around Brian, and the air thickened with tension, a living embodiment of dread. Claudia felt every single pulse echoing in her chest. Brian. Please. She shouted, each word a desperate prayer. He writhed, his body tormented by forces he couldn't see but felt deep within. It's too late. He gasped, full of anguish. I can't fight them. They're too powerful. Dark figures danced around him, flickering like flames. They fed on his fear, his confusion, growing larger and more menacing as they engulfed him. Claudia's heart raced. This was not just about the struggle between light and darkness. It was a fight for Brian's very soul. Don't you dare give in. Daniel barked, scrambling closer. We are right here. Fight back. He grabbed Claudia's shoulder, the warmth of his touch grounding her, sparking a flicker of hope. Claudia took a deep breath and steadied herself. She could feel her own doubts gnawing at her resolve, but she had to cast them aside. Think of all those moments we've fought together. You're not alone. Her voice cut through the shadows, a reminder of brighter days. Claudia Bryan's voice was laced with regret and fear. What if I can't come back? What if I become what they want? Don't say that. You're stronger. Remember who you are. She cried out, desperation clawing at her throat. A crackling energy surged, throwing shadows back momentarily. The air shifted, and Claudia felt something stir beneath the surface. It wasn't just Bryan fighting for his life, it was a deep, primal magic battling between realms. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, swarming with renewed fury. They reached out towards Daniel, a sinuous wave with the force of a hurricane. Claudia! He yelled, stumbling as the darkness lunged at him. Daniel! She extended her arm, panic flaring within. She needed to protect them both. Just as the shadow lunged towards him, she felt a rush of energy shoot through her, igniting her very essence. No, this wasn't just Bryan's fight, this was theirs. Together. Claudia yelled, locking eyes with Daniel. Their hands met, and an electric pulse surged through them, connecting their determination to Bryan's fading spirit. Bryan! We're with you! They shouted in unison, their voices harmonizing into a powerful wave. The shadows recoiled, rattled by the strength of their bond. Claudia could see the flicker of humanity reignite in Bryan's eyes. Claudia Daniel, he grimaced, pain etching his features. I can't hold them forever. Then don't. Claudia urged, a surge of clarity gripping her. Channel it. Use your anger against them, they thrive on fear. Beat them with your strength. That spark of doubt in Bryan's gaze yielded to determination. He took a deep breath, his body relaxing for just a heartbeat. Shadows hesitated, sensing the shift. Fight back, Bryan! Daniel shouted. You own this power. Bryan's resolve solidified, and his voice boomed, laced with newfound authority. I am not afraid. With a shout that shook the factory's decaying walls, Bryan unleashed a force so powerful it sent tremors rumbling beneath them. The shadows trembled and twisted, caught off guard by his defiance. But it was fleeting. They recoiled but regrouped quickly, ready to retaliate with brutal ferocity. Claudia felt the factory pulse, aware that time was running out. Would Bryan manage to channel this power against their attackers, or would they all be drowned in the very darkness they aimed to conquer? The ground shook beneath them, a sign of impending collapse. They had to break this connection before it was too late. The question loomed larger than ever: could they save Bryan, or would he be lost forever in the abyss alongside the shadows that hungered for his spirit? As the darkness surged once more, a chilling realization struck Claudia. They weren't only battling shadows, they were waging war against something far ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and that something was more powerful than they had ever imagined. What else would they uncover in this fight for Bryan's soul? What dark secrets would be revealed before the end? The walls of the factory trembled, and an anguished roar echoed through the air. Bryan, caught in a tempest of shadow and light, felt the energy shift. The darkness coiled around him, eager to claim him as its own. But deep within, a flicker of courage ignited. I want to let you win. He shouted, the conviction in his voice crashing against the shadows like waves against a craggy shore. Claudia felt the connection between them, a lifeline threaded with hope and shared memories. Remember when we climbed that tree in the backyard? She yelled, trying to pierce through his turmoil. You wanted to reach the sky. Let us reach for what's good in you, Bryan. Daniel added, you're not just a vessel for this darkness. You're more than this pain. Don't let it define you. The shadows writhed, sensing their resistance. Claudia and Daniel squeezed each other's hands, pouring their resolve into Bryan. His gaze shifted, a battle of emotions crossing his features: uncertainty, fear, and finally, a glimmer of unwavering strength. Together. They shouted, a chorus of defiance that cut through the seething chaos. The shadows momentarily faltered, and Brian seized that moment. He closed his eyes, drawing in a breath steeped in memories, all the laughter and camaraderie they had shared flooding back to him. Let us go. He thrust his arms forward, channeling everything he had into a powerful surge of light. The shadow shrieked, pulling back as he became a force of raw power, born from pain yet reborn in resilience. The factory erupted in luminous brilliance, light spilling forth like a sun breaking through storm clouds. The shadows recoiled, retreating from the brilliance that Brian emitted. Claudia's heart raced with exhilaration as she stood firm at his side. Yes. Fight it. She encouraged. Brian's eyes opened, shining with fierce determination. I am not alone, he proclaimed, sending a shockwave through the dark splotches that encroached upon him. The shadows twisted and shrieked, slinking back into the crevices of the factory, their hold weakening as Brian's light consumed the darkness inch by inch. Daniel shouted, "You have the power, Brian. Push them away." And just like that, Brian focused his energy. He drew from Claudia and Daniel, intertwining their strengths with his own. Their collective will transformed into a visible force. The light surged brighter, pushing back the shadows further until they broke apart like smoke fading into nothingness. The echoes of lost despair faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of clarity and unity. With one final push, Brian thrust out his hands, and the last remnants of darkness were expelled from the factory. The oppressive air lifted, leaving only silence and the echo of their heavy breathing. I did it. Brian gasped, shock replacing the previous dread on his face. Claudia rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him tightly. You did it, Brian. You fought back. Tears welled in her eyes, relief flooding in like warm sunlight after an icy storm. Daniel joined them, enveloping them in a group hug. We're family, no matter what. Always remember that. But in Brian's eyes, a shadow of uncertainty remained. What if this darkness comes back? What if I lose control again? Claudia squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with resolve. We'll face it, together. You won't have to carry this alone again. We're here, all of us. The promise hung in the air, heavy with meaning. They stood together in the once darkened factory, the shards of Brian's past still scattered across the floor but now casting reflections of hope rather than despair. Change was possible, and healing was on the horizon. Let us go home, Daniel suggested softly, and the three of them stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the darkness behind. As they stepped into the moonlit street, a strange calm washed over them. Claudia felt a spark of something within: gratitude, hope, and an unspoken understanding that while their battles had just begun, they were no longer alone. They would forge a path toward healing together, intertwining their pasts into a future. Unburdened by shadows, but the journey wouldn't be easy. They needed to face the repercussions of what had happened. And that would mean confronting not only the darkness outside but also the darkness that lingered in their hearts. Together, they vowed to heal, protect one another, and navigate their family's fractured legacy with courage. With a final glance back at the factory, transformed from a lair of shadows into a testament of their unity, Claudia whispered, "This is just the beginning." And as they walked away, the night felt lighter, the weight of their fears slowly lifted. They might still have scars, but those scars would remind them of survival, a badge of honor forged in a battle of love and loss. Now, it's your turn. If you loved this gripping conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what makes this community thrive.